We're going to start with the greatest lie in football. The world believes that Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo hate each other. The media sells it as a war between good and evil, the natural genius against the manufactured machine, the humble boy from Argentina against the arrogant superstar from Portugal. But this is a complete fabrication. If you look closely at the psychology of these two men, you will uncover a much darker, far more fascinating truth. They do not hate each other. In fact, they needed each other to survive. Without Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo would have stopped trying 10 years ago. Without Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi would have been bored of football before he turned 30. They are not opposites. Psychologically, they are two halves of the exact same disease, an obsession with absolute perfection that isolated them from the rest of humanity. To understand how this symbiotic monster was created, we have to go back to the beginning, and we have to understand the trauma that forged them. Let us start with the boy from Madeira. When the world looks at Cristiano Ronaldo, they see an ego that borders on delusion. They see a man who points at his own chest when he scores. They see a man who built a museum dedicated entirely to himself. They see arrogance. But from a psychological standpoint, arrogance is rarely born from confidence. Arrogance is almost always born from fear. Ronaldo was born into extreme, crushing poverty on a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. His father was a heavily traumatized war veteran who returned from Angola and drank himself to death. His mother was a cook and a cleaner who considered terminating the pregnancy because they simply could not afford another mouth to feed. As a child, Ronaldo swept the streets. He begged for leftover burgers at the back door of a local fast food restaurant. When he moved to Lisbon at the age of 12 to join the sporting academy, he was bullied mercilessly. The other young boys mocked his thick island accent. They laughed at his cheap clothes. He cried every single day. This is where the ego was born. Ronaldo did not develop an ego because he thought he was better than everyone else. He developed an ego as a shield. It was a psychological survival mechanism. If he did not convince himself that he was a god, he would have been crushed by the reality of his existence. He had to look in the mirror every morning and tell himself he was the greatest, just to survive the day. And this trauma evolved into a pathological obsession with control. When you grow up in a chaotic house with an alcoholic father and zero money, you have no control over your life. So what did Ronaldo do? He took absolute, tyrannical control over the only thing he could: his own body. The thousands of hours in the gym, the ice baths at 3 in the morning, the 6 meticulously measured meals a day. This is not just athletic dedication. This is a traumatized boy making sure that the world can never hurt him, embarrass him, or reject him ever again. His body became his fortress. His ego became his armor. And for a long time, it worked. He became the best player in the world. He conquered England. He won the Ballon d'Or. He stood alone at the top of the mountain. But then, he looked across the landscape, and he saw someone else. Someone who did not need armor. Enter the boy from Rosario. If Ronaldo's psychology is defined by loud, desperate control, Lionel Messi's psychology is defined by terrifying silence. Messi was born with a growth hormone deficiency. By the time he was 11, he was so small that teams stopped playing him because they were afraid he would get broken in half. His family had to cross the ocean to Spain just to afford the medical treatments that involved injecting needles into his own legs every night. He was uprooted from his home, his friends, and his culture. In Barcelona, he was so quiet that his teammates in the academy thought he was literally mute. But Messi did not need to speak, because in Argentina, there is a concept called the potrero. It translates to the uneven, dirt patches of land where street football is played. The potrero teaches you that words mean nothing. The only thing that matters is what you can do with the ball at your feet. Messi's psychological profile is often misunderstood as humility. People look at his quiet demeanor and assume he is just a modest, shy guy. This is a massive miscalculation. Messi possesses a cold, ruthless, sociopathic level of competitive drive. You do not score 91 goals in a single calendar year by being a nice guy. You do it by being a silent assassin. Messi does not have the loud, outward ego of Ronaldo because he does not need it. He never needed to convince himself he was the best. He just knew. When the ball touches his foot, the universe obeys him. He does not need to point at his chest because the world is already bowing. His silence is not humility. His silence is supreme, unquestionable arrogance. The kind of arrogance that does not even acknowledge the existence of doubt. By the late 2000s, these two psychological profiles collided in Spain. Real Madrid versus Barcelona. The manufactured machine against the natural genius. The ego as a shield against the silent assassin. And this is where the symbiosis began. Before we dive into the mental torture of El Clasico, if you are fascinated by the hidden psychology of football, make sure to subscribe and drop a like. We expose the unseen angles of the beautiful game every single week. Now, let's look at the darkest years of the rivalry. From 2009 to 2018, Messi and Ronaldo were locked in a psychological prison of their own making. Imagine being Cristiano Ronaldo during the early years in Madrid. You have dedicated your entire existence to being the best. You have sacrificed your childhood, your body, and your mind. You are scoring 50 goals a season. And yet, every January, you have to sit in a chair in Zurich and watch Lionel Messi lift the Ballon d'Or. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in a row. For a man whose entire psychological armor is built on the belief that he is the greatest. This was literal mental torture. Messi was the anomaly that Ronaldo's brain could not process. Ronaldo did everything perfectly, and yet, this quiet kid from Argentina was still slightly better. Most human beings would have broken. They would have accepted second place. They would have given up. But Ronaldo's trauma response kicked in. He weaponized the pain. He used the humiliation of watching Messi win to push himself to a level of physical and mental endurance that no athlete has ever reached. He turned his anger into a terrifying consistency. He won 4 of the next 5 Ballon d'Ors, dragging himself back to the mountaintop through sheer, psychopathic willpower. And what about Messi? Why did Messi need Ronaldo? Because genius gets bored. When everything is easy. When you can dribble past 5 professional defenders without raising your heart rate. The game loses its thrill. Without Ronaldo breathing down his neck. Without Ronaldo scoring hat tricks every weekend. Messi would have lost his motivation. Ronaldo was the alarm clock that woke Messi up every morning. If Messi scored twice on Saturday, Ronaldo would score 3 times on Sunday. They became locked in an arms race that destroyed the rest of the footballing world. They pushed the standards so impossibly high that they became completely isolated. Nobody else understood what they were going through. Nobody else could relate to the pressure. They were like Batman and the Joker, defined entirely by the existence of the other. If you remove one, the other suddenly loses his purpose. They shared a psychological burden that no one else in history will ever understand. They were enemies on the pitch. But in the dark, they were the only 2 men speaking the same language. And then, the inevitable happened. The era ended. Ronaldo left Europe for Saudi Arabia. Messi won the World Cup and left for Miami. The symbiotic monster was finally torn apart. And the psychological void they stepped into must have been terrifying. When you have spent 15 years looking over your shoulder at a ghost. What happens when you turn around and the ghost is gone? What happens to a man when the only benchmark he ever respected is removed from the equation? For Ronaldo, the decline has been highly visible. The frustration, the outbursts, the desperate attempts to prove he is still the center of the universe. Because without Messi to fight against, his armor feels heavier. For Messi, the decline is quieter. He retreats further into his family, playing out his final days in the sun, finally free from the relentless pressure of the arms race. The war is over. But here is the most tragic part of this psychological profile. They will never be friends. People hope that when they both retire, they will sit on a beach together and drink wine. But they won't. Because looking at each other is looking at the one person who caused them the most suffering in their lives. They are a mirror reflecting 15 years of stress, anxiety, and obsession. They respect each other more than anyone else on earth. But you cannot be friends with the person who forced you to sacrifice your sanity. They were trapped in a cage together for 15 years, fighting for the same piece of meat. And now that they are out, all they want is peace. This is the hidden angle of the greatest rivalry in history. It was never a story about football. It was a story about a boy who needed to be a god to survive, and a boy who played like a god but just wanted to be left alone. And how, for 15 magical years, they kept each other alive. Comment below, who do you think suffered more psychologically during this rivalry, Messi or Ronaldo? And what untold football story do you want us to cover in the next video? Let us know. Also, did you find the 3 hidden golden balls in this video? If you found them all, prove it by commenting the exact timestamps below. If this video made you see the game differently, subscribe and leave a like. We go deeper every single week. I will see you in the next one.